What have we got here?
This is a white-plumed antbird.
Oh wow, is this a male?
You can't tell, actually. It's the males and females. Oh, hey, buddy. Yeah, I know.
He's a chirper.
So it's really interesting. So these guys fly into the net because they follow army ants. So they're army ant followers, and that's how they feed. They're insectivorous.
So the army ants catch insects, and they're carrying them back to their nest, and then these guys use that as a way.
Yeah, they follow them. Yeah. So when they're too busy following the army ants, they accidentally fly into the net.
Beautiful crest.
Absolutely. So you want to be very gentle when you're taking them out of the net, because they can be fragile. But also you don't want to take too long because they start getting stressed. I know, bud. I know. So like with their wings, what we usually do is you get the feet firm in hand so that they don't thrash about and accidentally break the foot. Then see how the net is caught under the wing like this? Just gently just lift it over. And then, boop, there we go.
So in terms of collecting these birds, every bird you capture, you're collecting a database between the logged reserve and between the sustainably logged area and the wilderness reserve. And that paints a picture of how healthy the ecosystem is in both areas, and you can compare and contrast the activities that you're doing.
Essentially, yeah. So especially when we compare it to the wilderness preserve, which we is no disturbance within the wilderness preserve, we have a way to compare whether the changes that we observed in the logged area can be attributed to logging or something else.
Okay.
So the wilderness preserve is essentially our control site.
And I suppose that's why it's so important that everything is so carefully regulated and managed, and you're watching out for any, untoward or illegal activities, because that's damaging the same things that you're trying to study.
Exactly. And in the end, this contributes to a long-term database that's really important for Iwokrama, because it helps inform them about their sustainable practices and how it's influencing the wildlife around it.
So what's your specific research in? Because you're doing a PhD, right?
Right. So I'm looking at the long-term impacts of reduced impact logging within Iwokrama.
Okay. And what have you found so far in the work that you're doing?
So I'm still collecting data, so don't take it as a conclusion like this is what it is, but what we're finding is that a lot of the species diversity, so the species that we're catching, are similar to the species that were caught in pre-logging times, and what we're hoping to do is develop a temporal comparison between pre-logging and post-logging, and in that way I think we could see the bigger picture in terms of the population dynamics, so how species are moving in and out of the logging zones, especially for birds. So birds do exhibit what we call like idiosyncratic behaviors, so it's really difficult to quantify or to really tell a story or paint a picture of what's happening to their populations, because birds do whatever they want. Essentially. So hope temporal viewpoint, we can have an idea of how their populations are shifting, what species are coming in, what species are going out, and the numbers at which they're fluctuating.
That's exciting though. So what you're finding is that when properly managed, the timber concession areas that the sustainably logged areas here in Iwokrama are showing similar species dynamics to places in wilderness preserve.
Yeah, and it's also, well, I'm not sure about wilderness preserve as yet, because I still have to sample that area, but what we're finding is that the species recorded 10 years post-logging are showing similar species diversity to when it was to pre-logging days, so before Iwokrama began logging in the area. So it's kind of like they're showing numbers similar to no disturbance zones, kind of, if you want to look at it in that. Yeah, it is really interesting. I'm really excited to see the full picture once we get the full data set in.
So what happens now with this guy?
So we are going to put him in these adorable little cloth bags. So what happens is we'll set the mist nets a good way out from camp, so that us talking and analyzing stuff and all of that at camp, they don't hear it or it doesn't disturb the mist net area, because we want this area to be pretty quiet, so that birds think oh, nothing's going on, just grabbing a snack, and then they'll fly into the net. Right, so we'll check the nets based on the level of activity. So if it's a really active day, as in we're catching more than 3 birds per net that we set up, we'll usually take like every 15 minutes or every 10 minutes or something. If it's a slower day, every like 30 minutes to every hour, because you want to give that time gap where, you know, it's pretty quiet and that the birds can just fall in.
Okay.
And then when we take them back, we do just collect some biodata. So species, if you could tell the male from the female, we'll collect sex data, and then sometimes we'll collect molt data. So birds will molt either when they're switching life stages, so from juvenile to adult, before breeding, after breeding, that kind of thing, depends on the species. And that could tell us additional info. So when is their breeding period, when we have more juveniles than adults, or when there are more females than males. Like all of that stuff you could simply get from just having a bird fly in the mist net.